All right, folks. Hopefully, y'all are having a good Christmas Eve. Having a good one. Got my office is like so messy because of all the presents that my wife has wrapped, and I still haven't wrapped all the presents. We went a little overboard this year. I don't even know if I want to show it because it's like over there, and you'll see just like how I've just not done anything in here, but yeah. Look at all those presents. We still have to wrap more presents. We didn't mean to. It was like, oh, this would be a good present. We've been buying presents since like September, right? And so eventually we just ended up with like, oh, we kind of bought too many presents. So I think we might save some for birthdays or something. But my son's 6th birthday isn't until like July of next year, so I don't know what we're gonna do. Anyway, so pretty cool. Hope you guys are having a good Christmas Eve. Let's go and bring down the music here. Just want to do a little stream and hang out. Unfortunately, I couldn't stream on Saturday because just a bunch of stuff came up. That's how it is. Oh, Krampus Christmas is out right now, so you could get this big paperback. It get bigger than my head. I think it's, how many pages is it? It's like 465 pages, and it's done in the 2 columns. If you want to know what's different between this and, where's the old Christmas special? Piglet and Tigger. Woo! Oh, Piglet, don't fall down. Couple differences. This one is, you could still get the paperback for $20.19 through January. This one is going to last till mid-January because I got kind of late on the ball actually getting this published. That just happens. I wanted to put a lot of new content into this one, and there's a brand new novella called The Wasting Desert, which is a fun little fantasy horror act, so you guys may like that. So Krampus Christmas 2020. I used bigger fonts. If you have this one. This one was all about how is it possible for me to fit like 10 books into one book, and I did it, but I had to do it at like size 9.5 font or something, like really small font, and do 2 columns and do it at the maximum trim size, which is actually A4, and didn't let me get expanded distribution. I guess Barnes & Noble won't take it if it's this big for some reason. I don't know if it doesn't fit on their shelves, and we've got all that kind of stuff going on here. So there's this one. And so you can grab that one still. Here's the new one. So let's show you some of the new content that's in here. So Wasting Desert, that's a new one. There's all the Gen Y Chronicle stuff, which you may have seen on YouTube. Eyes in the Walls, the complete text of that. If you don't have that yet, you can get that in this collection. It's all about having it be really like horror and melancholy kind of stuff. So anyway, that's this. I have one in here called The Witch of the Woods, which I don't know, you probably haven't read before because it's not really available now. Entire text of Voice of the Void is in here. What else is in here? Oh, I have the parables and the fables are in here. Entire text of Moromasa Blood Drinker. Yeah, a bunch of stuff. So there's a lot of new stuff you haven't read before, stuff that's never been published before, or has only been available like in little one-off kind of things. So it's all collected in this thing, really centering around it being kind of melancholy and having horror. Obviously very big. And I'm a big person, and here's a big donut, right? I don't know. Here's a Red Bull can. I'm like, oh, it's the big Red Bull can. It's bigger than you think because this is the big Red Bull can. This is not the little... oh wait, here's a Coke can. There you go. That's how big it is. It's big. All right. I mean, this is how big I am. Is like I hold Coke cans with like my fingers, you know. All right. Hopefully you guys are having a good day. Let's check out what's going on. Yeah. Merry Christmas, guys. Oh, it's Christmas Day already in Australia. That's true. It's tomorrow. I was supposed to get my book copyrighted and meet with some publishers this year, but COVID screwed that up. Started a sequel to my book in the meantime. Here's hoping 2021 works better. So copyright, just so you know, if you're in the US, and really this applies to different levels of abroad, and this is not legal advice, by the way. Copyright is not something that you have to acquire. Copyright is the idea that you own the book that you wrote, that you own the intellectual property of it. It's copyrighted as soon as you write it. So it's a concept. It's like, it'd be like saying, I have to get ownership of my guitar. It's like, do you have your guitar? Yeah, I bought it. Then you own it, right? So that's what copyright is. If you're talking about filing with the Library of Congress, that is not a legal requirement, nor will that actually prevent you from losing a copyright suit in court. Rather, it's a public documentation that you wrote it on or before the specific time that you submitted it to the Library of Congress. So if at some point somebody says, well, I wrote this book, and you say, well, no, you didn't, because here's the evidence that the Library of Congress got it back in 2020, and here you are saying you wrote it in 2022. Obviously, I wrote it first. But if they're like, well, I wrote it in 2018, and it's published in 2018, and you could still lose the suit. So anyway, you don't have to file at the Library of Congress in order to have it be copyrighted. Copyright is a concept that's just attached to what you're doing there. Okay. All right, but I do appreciate it. Okay, Super Chat, thank you very much from Kaku. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to y'all. Hope everyone's enjoying their week in time, probably living in a Christmas isekai, lol. But low-key crazy idea. A Christmas isekai. I don't know how I would write that. Any lady advice having a lonely Christmas Eve? I'm not the best person to give advice on women because I'm married, which means it's like I don't use game and I don't participate in game, and I've been out of the game, right? But I don't know. The best advice I can give, it just depends what you want, right? Like pickup artists are going to direct you towards doing what pickup artists do. You could actually learn a lot of things from pickup artists about how to talk to women, but in general, a lot of that stuff is towards manipulating women, and that's not really what you want if you're trying to acquire a partner. Like if you're trying to get married to another human being, engaging in things which are intended to manipulate somebody psychologically are not what you want to do. You want to have an honest relationship right from the get-go. So it's really about finding somebody that is has compatible values to you, and then establishing a meaningful relationship by having lots of shared experiences. So when we're young, infatuation is a powerful feeling. And so yeah, let me just do a little bit of a diatribe on this. Sorry, I'm a little congested today for some reason. So when you were young, infatuation is a powerful feeling. Infatuation is like, I'm in love with this person, and I think about this person all the time, yada, yada, yada. As you get older, you start to differentiate basically that feeling of having a crush on someone from what is a more meaningful and deep and abiding love between, say, two married people. That kind of love happens. It's not that it's exclusive with infatuation at all, because I would say I'm still infatuated with my wife, and I've been with her for 8 or 9 years or something, and I've known her for, oh man, at this point, almost 20. But it's not the same. And the real love, the love that's has a deeper meaning, grows out of shared experiences, acts of caring between you and another person. That's how real love ends up being established. Love that isn't broken, love that isn't subject to the person's feelings at any particular given moment. Because one of the things about infatuation is that it fades for a lot of people, and then they're like, I don't feel the same way about this person as I did before. Or I don't feel about this person the way I felt about this other person. Therefore, I don't really love this person. So as you go into young adulthood, a lot of people they date a girl and they're like, man, I just don't feel the same about her as I felt about this other girl that it didn't work out with, right? Like this girl that I was infatuated with in high school or something. So you think that you don't really love that person, or there's nothing there for the relationship, or you don't have chemistry. And women do the exact same thing, by the way. This is not like just a men only thing. Women do the same thing, maybe just from slightly different angles, but they're always comparing how they feel and to some previous feeling, rather than looking at love as something which is developed through, shared experiences, acts of caring towards each other, mutual respect that ends up creating a loving relationship. Rather, the more deep abiding love it happens actively rather than just something that strikes you like Cupid hitting his arrow. The Greeks and the Romans viewed love, what people think of as love now, like I'm in love with someone. They viewed that as a madness and like a curse. So it was something that afflicted you and would cause you to act irrationally and against your interests, against the state in some cases, which was viewed as very bad by the ancients, and against your family, make you betray your family, would make you do horrible acts. Like that's what a lot of the mythological and heroic and legendary stories of antiquity have to do with this. Somebody falls in love and then does bad things, and in turn brings about the wrath of the gods or ends their family line, something like that. Medea, who falls in love with, who was it? I think falls in love with Jason, and like chops up her brother and throws him into the ocean so Jason can escape. So that stuff's really is different. And this is something that I rarely see in media, in books or in movies. And I actually saw one in a recent anime, because I decided one of the things I'm going to do for 2021 is do more anime content on anime series, because I have more fun watching them. I have more fun watching things from Japan. And I like the fandom a little bit better. I like interacting with the fans. I think it's more fun than doing kind of cinema reviews and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I'll probably be doing in 2021. But this is something that you almost never see at least in Western media, is this idea that the infatuation is inferior to a more deep and meaningful and abiding love that develops between two people who have mutual respect for each other. So like, I don't know, if you look at something like The English Patient, it's basically about people abandoning things which are meaningful and abandoning things which are virtuous and abandoning things which have lasting importance to themselves, their families, and to others in favor of an immediate sexual desire. And people watched that and they sympathize with like the immediate sexual desire, and they find that interesting, maybe because they're in a boring old marriage. And so it's easy to look out of a boring marriage where you're with one person and you don't love them, don't feel like puppy dog love in them. You're like, oh, I'm infatuated with this other person, just have an affair. It's like a prurient role playing. That's usually what we get in the West, and rather than having something where we have a story where somebody has a kind of immediate infatuation and then is basically able to see the more important and more meaningful real love that happens. Love that's hypersexual or pathos driven, not good. Yeah, that's the eros, the Greek word eros. So in Greek, the word love, like in English, we have this word love that encapsulates too many concepts in some ways, and it depends on context what you mean. So in Greek, they used several words. So eros, from which we get the word erotic, has to do with that sexual desire, an intense sexual desire and infatuation. And really, it's not even as we would think of it as love. We tend to attach the word love to the feeling of erotic desire, just because that's one of the quirks of how I guess the English language interprets those things. Like, we always are viewing these concepts through a lens called language, and we're communicating them to others through the medium called language. And it's never, I wouldn't say never, but it's usually not a perfect translation of what we mean. That's why we have to use so many words sometimes. So that attachment's not really, in antiquity, Eros was something that was, it was necessary for the creation of the earth, like the entire, like if you were going to read Metamorphosis, or really, it's not just Ovid. Ovid focuses on it because he wrote a lot of like sexual poetry and stuff, but the world is basically created through sex. So the first gods arise out of chaos, out of nothing. Chaos doesn't mean like disorder, it means a gap. It means like nothing. So they arise out of nothing. And just as an interjection, the Greek philosophers knew the problems with this, even Aristotle. And so they would conjecture, there's probably some other god. There's a god that created the stuff. And things didn't just arise out of nothing, because that makes no sense. Things proceed from one cause to another. There must be some prime mover. There must be an original thing which created things so that they could exist. But anyway, the heavens and the earth are gods that are born, and they have sex with each other to produce the Titans. And the Titans can't escape from Gaia because I think it's Kronos is like on top of Gaia. And so, no, wait, is it Kronos? Anyway, heaven's on top of Gaia. Is it Kronos that cuts off I'm trying to remember if Kronos was the heavens or if it was, I'm trying to remember all the names involved. Who am I thinking of? Am I thinking of Saturn? Who am I thinking of? You guys tell me. Cuts off the genitals, and so then heaven goes away from Earth, and then there's room for the Titans to be born and to exist on the Earth, right? So like all of the gods are born through sex in antiquity. So, from the beginning, maybe Aphrodite was there because sexual desire was there. Sexual desire is what drives animals. Animals reproduce because of sexual desire. You could even say plants don't have a thing called desire, but they reproduce sexually. They have their pollen go over to another flower, or, and then more plants are born. So this was not viewed as like love, the way that we would think of it now. That's just been kind of attached to it, that marriage also includes erotic components. Rather, Eros is something separate from that. And then there's more, philos kind of love, which is like a brotherly love, like caring for your fellow man. Uranos, that's right. Uranos. So yes, Uranos, it's kind of weird because like the mythology's inconsistent. Because in some cases, it's like Aphrodite's already there. Uranus was the sky, and so he was on top of Gaia, and then Kronos cut off his genitals and threw them into the ocean, which the ocean was also a god. That wasn't Poseidon. And then Aphrodite was born from the foam of his genitals. But from some, I think, I'm trying to remember which, there's different parts of it. In some traditions, Aphrodite's already there because obviously sexual love has to be there for Uranus and Gaia to be having sex in the first place to produce the Titans. Atlas is the one holding up the earth. Atlas is a Titan, and his punishment is to hold up the earth. And there's actually during one of Heracles' adventures, he holds up the earth for Atlas, and Atlas is like, later, and then Heracles has to say, well, just take it off my shoulders for a minute, and then Heracles is like, later, Atlas, this is your job. So Merry Christmas, y'all. It's frowned upon to remotely bring any meaningfulness to any seasonal holidays. Tell Sam that the culture is predominantly nihilistic and cynical. Yeah. Let's see here. I don't like the Jim Carrey Grinch. I hate it. I actually really hate it. I find it's sickening, like everything about it. Here's the problem with Christmas. So here's my next little diatribe. Yeah, removing the meaning of Christmas. A lot of people go by Hesiod. Yeah, that's right. So the secularization of Christmas is a very interesting phenomenon, and it's something that has been kind of decried in our culture for as long as I've been alive. And the secularization of Christmas has to do with looking at the traditions as apart from the celebration of the birth of Christ. And on the surface, you're like, well, and I've even made this argument, those traditions really are quite separate, right? Like, a Christmas tree, there's nothing specifically attached to that. That's a folk tradition, from Germanic areas that grew over time. And we may attach symbolism to it, and we're not really sure what the original symbolism is. If it was pagan, it's probably pagan on some level, right? A lot of the traditions. So when I say, when people say Christmas is pagan, there's two things they can mean. They can mean like, oh, well, it's the Feast of Saturnalia, or Saturnella. Anyway, it's the Feast of Saturn. Or it's that the traditions are pagan. And really, I would say the latter is more true than the former. Because Christmas was probably being celebrated before Saturn as a holiday was celebrated. But you have traditions that are basically folk traditions, like have a tree and decorate it, right? Obviously, a tree is more significant in Germanic and Norse mythology than Christian mythology, unless you're viewing like the cross as a tree or something, or you could attach symbol like the tree is alive in the dead of winter, but that has that's a little bit more having to do with the folk elements of winter. It's like, why do we eat this on this time? Well, it's tradition. There's just a lot of traditions. You have Sinterklaas, which is probably one of the main origins of the modern Santa Claus. Sinterklaas rides through town on his horse and gives presents, and you leave hay in your shoes for him. So it's a little bit idolatrous, right? Because you don't leave offerings for gods, right? You don't put the bread out for the idol and hope that he gives you something. So this has been an objection to Sinterklaas I've heard from numerous times, is that like, oh, if you're leaving milk and cookies for Santa, and or hay, now the parents just kind of take the hay out and it's all pretend play. But it would be, if you did that seriously, then it would be not a veneration of Saint Nicholas, but rather like an idolatrous transaction, like offering him rum or something like that you would get in voodoo. Voodoo's very about kind of pagan ritual like that. So a lot of that stuff is just kind of attached onto it. But as you secularize it and you take away what really kind of binds the whole thing together, you're left with this kind of nihilistic question of, why are we giving presents? And so my favorite reasons for giving presents is, there's two of my favorite reasons. The first one is basically the cargo cult thing. It's tradition. We do it because we do it. We do it because that's what we've always done, right? It's like part of our culture, I guess. It's like, yeah, but it's attached to something that's a very significant religious event. So when you divorce those two, you're left with like, I guess we give gifts because. Or my favorite one, this one comes from the conservative camps, and I hear this argument every single year. It's good for the economy. Now, this is another kind of idolatrous thing where it's like we're putting this idol called the economy up there, and we're pretending that if we do something, the economy will give us stuff, right? This is basically the way the ancients viewed their idols and viewed their gods. It's like, we leave an offering for the gods, and they enjoy the smell of the sacrifice, and then they favor us in battle. Or we'll sacrifice, we'll kill some criminals by hanging them and poking them with spears, and then Odin will grant us victory on the field of battle, right? That's an idolatrous arrangement. This is one of the reasons why you do, when you pray, and you pray like an Our Father, it's, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, not, hey, can you do something like, what's our transaction here? It's like, it's not a transactionary thing. And really God's grace is not transactionary. So it's a grace that's given to you. You don't have to, do some sort of prescribed set of, Lord, let me give you 5 loaves of bread and then I get to receive the grace of Christ. No, it doesn't work that way. Anyway, so when you divorce that, you end up with this nihilistic giving. And so the whole thing, like, it's good for the economy, that's another broken window fallacy where it's like, we have to spend money or like the economy will collapse, guys. If we don't keep the flames alive with the Vestal Virgins, then Rome will be conquered. It's the same thing. So no, you shouldn't give presents because it's good for the economy. People are scrambling to find reasons for like Christmas to exist in the absence of the celebration of an actual an actual religious holiday. And I say this about traditions too. Some people use Christmas trees, some people don't. Different cultures have different traditions, but they're always attached to Christmas. Now, it'd be weird if you go to somewhere like Japan and they have Christmas, but it's just completely separate from religion, and it's just like it's just a fun little festival. It's a winter festival where we like give some presents and stuff. Cool. And we pretend that Santa Claus is a thing. The secularization of Christmas ends up just becoming a nihilistic material fest where the reciprocal part of gift giving becomes really tantamount. And I've complained about this in the past where it's like you're obligated to give people presents because they're giving you presents. So you want to give the best present possible for people so that they feel inclined to always give you the best present possible. It becomes completely transactionary instead of like a meaningful gift giving. So once you divorce the idea, like we give gifts for these charitable reasons and to celebrate Christ and because of the spirit of giving, to reciprocal gift giving, and you know that there's someone in your life that's like that. That's like, well, I don't think I'm going to give him a very good present because last year he just gave me dish towels. Have you ever encountered that? That's that. You're in the reciprocal gift giving mode. And I remember, maybe it was a philosophy class. We were talking about gift giving, and I was like, yeah, you give gifts because of this. And he's like, no, Christmas is reciprocal gift giving. Birthdays are reciprocal gift giving. And he like laid it out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're really right. Like our culture does not view gift giving as a giving thing. It's a transaction. It's I want, it's involving another person in getting yourself stuff. Pink Hello Kitty guitar, I Am Jelly. It's a good guitar too. It sounds good for like death metal. Maybe I'll plug it in. You guys can hear some riffs or something. That might be fun to do. Anyway. There's totally a massive conspiracy for every parent around the world to just eat the cookies and leave the gifts under the trees. That's exactly it, dude. If you want to talk about, this is a great example. Think about from the perspective of like a 4-year-old, right? Imagine telling him, how likely do you think it is that every parent is doing this? You'd be like, it seems completely unlikely, but it's true. It is a massive conspiracy of parents against children. Now, I just as a by the way, my children are not raised to think Santa or Santa Claus is real. We do 2 Christmases. We do Santa Claus because we're Dutch, and then we do regular Christmas tomorrow. So we have never told him that Santa is real. And we've never pretended that he's real. We always just say, we pretend. You may want to pretend with other kids. We tell them like, don't be mean to other kids because other parents get all bent out of shape if you tell their 4-year-old like Santa isn't real. I remember because when I was 4, I figured out Santa isn't real, and I told all the kids, I'm like, it's impossible for Santa to do this. Everybody's pretending. It's not really Santa down at the mall. My son was being a troll. He's like, oh, Santa was really here in our town. And he was dancing, and people were lining up trying to get presents from him, trying to demand presents, and he just flew away on a reindeer. He just like told me this whole story about Santa like coming and dancing in the town square. But he knows like Santa stuff is not real. Yeah, Keynes is the post-liberal Saint Nick. This is a great example, Kaku. So John Maynard Keynes, if you don't know who he is, quick primer, very important economist during the Great Depression in the 1930s. And the idea of Keynesian economic theory is all about the velocity of money. And that's if the economy slows down, it's the transfer of money between people that really is what's slowing down. And so if people are holding onto their money because of uncertainty involving the economy, the government should step in and spend money. They should spend money, and that'll prime the pump. That'll keep that velocity of money higher and instill more confidence in people, and they'll go out and they'll spend things. Now, the thing about Keynes is that I don't think there's anyone who really buys the whole Keynes package today. They just pick out pieces of it. But Keynes developed a lot of great tools that you can use to measure economic activity. One of them is GDP. People tend to look at GDP as an idol. GDP just means how much money has moved between people. And when I put it like that, people realize that it's not really a measurement of the economy, because some things that you do which provide you benefit that you would pay for other people doing don't show up in the GDP because you do them yourself. So if you went out, let's say you live by a forest, like my friend Jesse lives up in the frozen north of British Columbia. He went out and cut down a tree for his Christmas tree. That's his tree. Now, he didn't buy a Christmas tree. So the money that you would spend on the Christmas tree, it's like it's not there, right? If you just put that money in your pocket or put it in a bank account, it shows up in a different part of the GDP. It's not spent, right? So from a Keynesian perspective, it's like, well, we really got to get people to spend money and have transactions between each other rather than, say, cutting down their own tree. It'd be better if we encourage people to go buy a tree, because then that tree merchant, but you end up with that broken window fallacy, because the $40 or $50, whatever he would, $100 he would spend on a nice Christmas tree, he instead puts it in a bank, which then creates the supply side of economy. It's used for investment, capital investment, things like that. So when you see it like that, then you realize, like, okay, there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't show up in GDP. A mother raising her children doesn't show up as a GDP activity, right? But it's probably the most important thing that you can do economically, because the children are going to be the next generation's production. If you aren't producing children don't show up in the GDP. And in fact, if a family's raising children, then they're reducing GDP, because there's not a man and a woman out in the economy making as much money as possible and spending it or investing it, or technically investment is when you buy capital goods, but you know what I mean, saving the money. They're not saving and spending the money, then it lowers GDP. Why? If a woman stays home, then it lowers GDP a little bit. But she's producing something that doesn't show up on GDP, which is infinitely, well, I shouldn't say infinitely, but like way more valuable than just her being out working. It's producing the next generation of production and producing human beings that continue your culture, your family, your line, your genetics, all that stuff. Way more important than GDP. So there's the problem with some of the tools. The tools are useful, but we end up, again, creating idols out of those tools. Where it's like, we got to increase the GDP. In fact, I think lots of the things that, if you look very cynically at the way our societies in the West are organized, not just in the US, but Canada, most European countries, you incentivize in a lot of Western countries, you incentivize maximizing the transfer of money between people rather than continuing your culture down the line, down to the next people. So you give high taxes. In order to pay those taxes, we both got to work. We have really high, very expensive apartments. In order to pay for that apartment, we both got to work, and we got to avoid having kids. Now, on paper, it looks like, well, the economy's booming because Fred and Jane are over there working their asses off and spending all that money, putting all that money in the economy. There's so much velocity of money. It's great. But what do you do when they don't have kids? Oh, we better import immigrants, right? Or that's like, if you don't import immigrants, it's like the economy will shrink. There's less people. The economy is allowed to shrink when there's less people. Then it's right. Do you need as much stuff being produced if there's half as many people? The answer is no. You need half as much stuff. And in fact, you probably need less than that, because if 30%, we had the population decrease by, let's say, 30% over the next 30 years because no one's having kids, that makes all stuff cheaper, because we already made a bunch of durable goods that don't just disappear. Like the guitars don't disappear because children are absent, right? So some dude who didn't have kids sells his guitars later. Guitars are cheaper. That's good for everyone who wants to buy guitars and wants to get into playing guitars. More people, it's cheaper goods for the people that remain. So we can't have that, because we need to keep blowing up that GDP. So like my pension will keep getting bigger, and the Dow Jones will keep getting bigger. All these sorts of things. It's just an idolatrous approach to the economy that really creates a lot of destruction for our society. Overvaluing that little quantitative thing. Let's look at those numbers and pump them up. That has produced a lot of negative incomes in the West. This is by the way. All right. There's my little diatribe on that. Anyway, the point is, when you start divorcing Christmas from everything else, you just end up with like a weird set of traditions that you can't justify in any way other than like a cargo cult mentality, which is like, we do this and maybe the economy gives us stuff, We get richer and richer, and yet depression and suicide rates are rising. There's something to that, which is that having lots of stuff doesn't make you happy. I've learned that. I mean, I know that. I learned that really by interacting with some extremely rich people. The richest people I've known were not the happiest people I knew. The poorest people I knew were also not the happiest people I knew. So you have to have a certain amount of material comfort, I think. If you're completely materially insecure, it's very difficult to be completely happy unless you have some sort of monk-like mentality where you don't care whether you live or die, but that's a different thing. But if you have a ton of stuff, it just doesn't magically make you happier because you're still limited by people. You know, the guy who has $800 million worth of stuff, he maybe still can't get the woman he wants to marry him. It's like, the woman I love never loved me back. But Jimmy, who works at the car dealership, has the woman he loves. Which of us should envy the other? You know? Money thinking, the purely economic interpretation of the world is a symptom of the late stage decline of a civilization. Nobody in the Renaissance, let's say, thought like the economists of today. It's true. I'm not going to say it's like always a symptom of late stage decline, but I would say it's a sign of decline of the importance of culture. You know, the ancient Romans didn't go out and conquer simply because there was gold in it. Now, they got gold out of it, but that wasn't the only reason. The best predictor of individual resilience is a strong family narrative and sense of intergenerational connectedness. I think that that's a very important predictor, and I think there's some evidence to that too. Is that, like, even people that come from, you know, poor socioeconomic standards, if their parents remain together, they complete high school, they keep a job, they're materially more successful often than their parents, and then they have good life outcomes. They get married, they have happiness, those sorts of things. And where those things are missing, that's where you get all of the social problems. And this is why I think there's been a lot of focus on, you know, it ends up being kind of a racial focus here in the U.S. because so much of it is concentrated in American blacks in particular. But if you look at, you know, blacks who have all those things, right, have like a solid family, then the next generation, it's fine. Or you look at other countries that have a high African population, but they have those things. They don't have the same social problems. So a lot of the root of the social problems, you know, in our poverty is these things being broken apart. And I think often they're broken apart by the state using welfare and lots of other things. I'm very cynical about that stuff, but it's true. By telling your children that Santa is real, you are subconsciously teaching them that needless conspiracies are good, just because. It's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, money thinking. I like that. I like that word, though, Deduda. Money thinking. Do you think the cronies are paying to tank the economy with shutdowns? I don't know if they're paying for it. But, so here's what I think is the likely thing. I can't prove it, but this is what I think is likely based on the way people have acted in the past. So people come up with a conspiratorial thing where it's like, they're just trying to get power. It's like, no, I think they really believe in what they're doing. It's the same thing with, like, the people running Star Wars don't just want money. They believe in their ideology. They really believe that coronavirus is a threat. Now, what happens, though, is that they're like, okay, well, we'll shut everything down to save people from the coronavirus, and they view themselves as heroes for doing so. They feel good about doing it because they think they're actually doing something good, not because they're just being given money. But those big companies, they have a lot of lobbying dollars. So they're like, hey, it's still okay to deliver stuff, right? Yeah, it'll still be okay to deliver stuff. We'll keep contributing to your campaign. Just make sure it's okay to deliver stuff. So the biggest companies like Amazon, who base their business around delivering stuff, they still get to deliver stuff. So the big companies are the ones that have the lobbying money to convince the people to make an exception for them. That doesn't mean the people making the exceptions don't believe heartily in what they're doing. I think they do. But they're also able to be persuaded, like, oh, we'll just make one exception for Amazon. It's not that big a deal. People love Amazon. Amazon gives me lots of money. Google gives me lots of money. We'll let them continue doing business. Because the small business doesn't give them any money. You know? The reality is that our politics, the further away you go from local in particular, the more it's financed by large corporations. And in some cases, it's the same corporations funding both sides of the aisle. It's the same you have corporations that in some cases, they'll be contributing the same amount to both candidates because it's a hedge a bet. It's like, well, we'd really like Democrat Jones over there to win because Democrat Jones has a lot of policy ideas that are favorable to us. But Republican Robert over there, we'll make sure we contribute to his campaign too so that we can remind him of some important things about our business if he wins, which he may win, So the closer I can't give you a source for this, but I think some people have looked this up. The closer a contest is, the more you see double donations. You see like the same donor giving to both people. It's like you have to hedge your bets. Companies have figured out that donating money to politicians, buying politicians it's a very efficient use of money because it saves you a lot of money when legislation would kind of tank your business. And it ends up, if you can get an exception, then it just tanks your competitors' businesses. It's all good. So I think it's advantageous. So I think this event shows that the people who already have the money, have the large stock of reserves, cash reserves, they're the ones who are able to buy the exceptions. And so they're going to be the ones that come out winning on the other side. Don't know if you played Metal Gear Revengeance, but the villain has a speech about how when you replace it, get rid of values, the only thing that matters becomes the dollar value. It's true. Now, here's the thing, though. There's some good to that. I'm going to give you the flip side of that and play the devil's advocate a little bit. I talked about the parable of the pencil in a recent video on how technological regression happens, which is like you lose expertise. The knowledge disappears or can't be used, and that's when you can't continue the technology. And there's historical examples of this, like fall of Rome, fall of Mesopotamian civilizations, the fall of civilizations here in Central America or here in the Americas, where they develop things like irrigation systems, water storage systems, and after the collapse of the empire and the dispersion of the expertise, the technology was lost. It was just forgotten because the expertise disappeared for how to do it. You have to have a complex economy where you have lots of division of labor in order for you to have lots of expertise in order to create really specialized technology. And as soon as you have things that don't allow you to have as much division of labor, like an economic downturn, you can have technological stalling. It can stall out, or it can even regress. Like you can have to go back to simpler technology because you can't maintain the more complex technology. Where was I going with that? Where was I starting? Oh yeah, the dollar value. So parable of the pencil is that somebody mining graphite in Brazil may hate the people who make the pencil, but because there's just the only thing that they're seeing is the price of the graphite, they're able to engage in that. So people are able to engage in economic transactions with people they might otherwise hate because currency depersonalizes the exchange. It allows them to do it. So trade is because of currency and because of the value of a dollar, the value of whatever the currency happens to be, if it's gold or something else historically, because that has value, people who have very conflicting values who may hate each other are able to collaborate economically without intending to do so. Because they just know that this dye is valued over here, this metal is valued over here. I'll get money if I transport it there. I'll get money if I sell it over there. And you don't have to think any further than that. And that creates a lot of economic benefit to that and allows people who would otherwise be very hostile and having wars with each other to not, because there's trade involved, because they because they are engaging in economic transactions. I've had some people try to say that like free trade creates wars. I haven't seen any evidence that free trade creates wars, but I don't think free trade also necessarily prevents wars either. I think if you have a lot of trade between countries, it's quite possible to end up with wars. There's like opium wars, things like that. Rent-seeking rules. Santa in perspective in mythos and how it helps us as a whole. The idea of giving and gathering in times of the winter. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm skeptical. It's a corporatized economical and political phenomena. Rather, anything medical or biological is presented. Yeah, so let's see here. You know, usually the gift giving is attached to, say, the three wise men, the Magi, giving gifts. It's like they gave gifts to Christ, we give gifts to each other. It may be divorced from that, or maybe that may be like symbolism, which is attached later. I don't really know. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to give gifts to each other at all. But I think where we end up with this whole Santa thing is really that we like kids to have some fun things that they get. That's just really what it comes down to. We like to give our kids stuff, and we like to have a reason to give them stuff for them to have fun with. Now, I don't think it's necessarily bad or anything like that. Nowadays, I think it's become an economic thing. It's like, hey, you want to buy that PlayStation 5 for your kid for Christmas? It's going to be $900 because I'm the one who had all of the program scripts to buy them all up, and you were not able to buy one. So you have to buy a PlayStation 5 for me. It's this thing, oh, my Christmas will be ruined if I don't get a PlayStation 5 for my son. Oh. I don't like that kind of stuff. Or people trampling each other to death to get a Tickle Me Elmo. This idea of we must get the best gifts for each other is ridiculous. And unfortunately, I feel like it has harmed my Christmases in the past, or it's harmed relationships with family because, like it or not, there's a lot of people in our lives that's their attitude. It's a transactional thing between people. I don't know what the good solution is. I mean, a solution, if you could get everybody on board, is like a no gift Christmas, or we only make gifts for Christmas and we accept no gifts. I did a Christmas where I didn't accept any gifts from people, and I really liked it because I just felt bad about receiving things, and having to go out and spend literally all my money to buy things for other people, or they'd be upset. So I just checked out of that one winter, and it made everybody mad. No one was happy with that situation except for me, because I didn't have a bunch of useless junk I had to then throw away. This is the other thing about the economy. If Christmas is good for the economy, it'd be better if we took the money we would spend on Christmas and just bought things for ourselves with it, because it's more efficient. You buy the thing that you really want or really need with your money, rather than buying something for someone else that you hope that they want or need, but obviously is not going to exactly meet their wants or needs. The person who's in the best position to decide your wants and needs is you, not your mom, not your girlfriend, not your wife. I've swallowed the doom pill. Demons coming from Mars. We're heading towards the cyberpunk future. I don't feel like we can do anything about it. Corporations just hold too much power already. Corporations and the state, I think now there's really not a meaningful division between the two. You have corporations acting on behalf of the state. You have the state acting on behalf of corporations. Where's the division? Right? Where's the division when Google silences you for saying things which are politically bad for parts of the government? And I've made this point before too. The government is not the people you elect. The government is a mass of faceless bureaucrats who were appointed in the past and have their own desires and their own actions, their own things that they do that are separate from elected officials. I think that's the lesson of Trump, is that putting the right guy in office doesn't fix the government, because the government just continues going forward unless you're able to just fire everyone, which is going to be really hard to do. Is it bad I want to have my kids believe in Santa so they behave when I'm not looking, and teach them believing something doesn't make it true, which is an important life lesson? That's not my perspective. I don't want my son to always feel like somebody's watching him. Like, I don't do the elf on the shelf thing. I say, like, God knows, but you don't. I don't like the idea of somebody feeling like they're always being spied on by somebody who's going to then reward or punish them, especially here in this life. Who's going to reward and punish them based on what they see or don't see. That's just not. I don't believe that that's a good way to instill integrity. Integrity really should come from, in my opinion, the spiritual aspect, which is that I do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, because it's part of what God wants me to do. It's part of what God expects me to do, that's why I do the right thing, not because somebody's going to give me presents later, later on down the year. It seems like after the first 2 Home Alone films, Christmas movies didn't really incorporate Christ and family together much. It's true. It became about, it's a cargo cult thing. It just became about Christmas trees and presents and red suits and stuff like that, rather than all the other stuff that is more meaningful, like nativities and things like that. Like in Home Alone, you actually see nativities, but in other movies, the nativity's absent. It's entirely a secularized Christmas. It's all about giving the right present or getting the right present or having some sort of spirit. And, the Grinch, how the Grinch Stole Christmas is actually a really great example of that. Dr. Seuss is really kind of a lefty when you look at it. And if you're a lefty watching this, this is not intended to insult you or anything. It's just his perspective. So when he wrote A Christmas Story, Christ is absent from it. And the Grinch is bad because he wants other people to suffer by not having fun on Christmas and not having stuff. So he steals their stuff. Then he has a change of heart because people are enjoying their company. Again, still nothing to do with Christ. They're still happy and enjoying each other's company. And that makes him realize that maybe there's more to it than stuff. So he brings the stuff back. And they have a feast. Like it's actually kind of a schizophrenic approach to Christmas when you think about it. Well, I guess I'll bring the stuff back because I realize that they're happy without the stuff. That you could have just thrown it over and been like, well, obviously I failed. Maybe next year I'll just murder everybody so that they won't sing. It's actually a slightly schizophrenic resolution. His change of heart, he should have had a change of heart by realizing that everybody was sad without their presents. That would be the actual way that you would do that. But his change of heart happens because they don't need the presents. I get the message he's trying to put. It's like Christmas is about more than stuff. It's like, then why'd he bring the stuff back? Obviously, it didn't affect their happiness. So what he could have done is taken the stuff over to a different town, of poor people or something. I don't know. It's kind of a weird schizophrenic thing. One way to stop corporate rent sinking through the government is to stop allowing citizens to participate in government. That's the idea of the republic. So the idea of a republic is that you don't have full enfranchisement. This is the idea of universal suffrage is something that I think has been kind of bad. And, it used to be white male landowners. Well, that meant that somebody had to be able to buy land or go to a place where no one owned the land and then form it into something. They had to put effort into holding property in order to vote. And disenfranchisement of women, well, everybody got married, There was always some exceptions, but if the man and woman have one collective interest, then they should have one vote. So it's really one vote, one family. As anti-feminist as that may seem, that's how it works. I think that that's appropriate. I mean, if you're going to give votes to men and women, both, then how do you determine landowning, right? You want people that have bought into the economy. You don't want people that are just shiftless wanderers going from place to place, putting in their vote into a place they're not going to remain. But that's actually our society now, is everybody's kind of a rootless wanderer. Nobody lives, it used to be, I moved, there was 10 years in a row where I moved every single year. I was a rootless wanderer. Why should I be able to have a say in any place that I stayed, given that I was not going to stay there? Given that, number one, I was not going to stay there, and then I'm not from there. Universal suffrage doesn't make that. It's like anybody that's temporarily there gets a vote. That's why we have so many illegal aliens voting in California. Oh, Oscar Wilde. Working through a big book about the church's relationship with banking and usury. Your thoughts on the subject? Merry Christmas. I'm not the expert. I've had Brian Niemeyer on the show. We've talked about usury before. I'm going to see if I can find an article, though, about usury and maybe link it. I'm not sure if I have it saved, though. But it's a free book on the Catholic Church and usury. Let me see if I have it. I might have it saved on my phone. I might have saved it on my phone. Let me look. And if it's on my phone, then I'll find some way to put it over here. I don't know if I saved it. I don't think I did. Nope, I don't think I did. All right, it's too bad. Yeah, there's some really good things I've read on usury. Basically, usury. The definition of usury is not just charging interest. It's charging interest that is, what is it? It's like above the value of the thing being charged on. And the conclusion that we came through, I had a big discussion with this on Twitter, is that like student loans, there's no way for student loans to not be usury, because you are making a loan on something that doesn't exist. So charging interest on personal loans without that aren't based on a physical object. Like if you loan someone money to buy a car, that is not usury, and you can charge interest on that. And if the person doesn't pay it, then you can recover the car, right? Because it's your money, you're renting the use of that money to the person to buy the car. If you're just giving the money to get a degree, you can't then claim the degree. You can't repossess somebody's college degree. They always have it. So legally, we created this thing where we can't get rid of student loans ever. You can never get rid of a student loan without paying it off or somehow having it forgiven by some other external thing. You can't get out of it with bankruptcy. You can't forfeit your college degree and then abandon your loan. Now, I know people that would do that. They're like, man, I have $100,000 in debt for my art degree. I would happily abandon being able to use my credential in order to get rid of the loan. Imagine if you could do that. If you could say, all right, I abandon my ability to claim that I have a Bachelor of Arts, and in return, I don't have to pay the loan. So it can't not be usury because it's not based on anything. It's not real. I'm not going to go into like St. Thomas Aquinas's arguments, but they're very sound on this, which is that if you're basing the loan on nothing, then it has to be usury if you charge interest on it. So you can charge an interest-free loan to somebody, and indeed the church actually did this. So the church used to give people loans and then expect them to pay back the loan, and if they couldn't, they wouldn't be able to recover it. They'd have to charge it with interest to try to get other people to do it. So there was always there's a lot of these weird little exceptions with charity where it was like, we give people loans and then we have to do it this way. We have to expect them to pay us extra because other people, half the people are going to default on the loans. Or you can only give the loan through a sense of charity, right? You give somebody a loan as a charitable act, and then if they don't pay it, it's because it's a charitable act. You don't really need to recover anything because it's a charitable act. Okay. So that's some of the stuff. I'm not the best equipped to talk about all of that stuff. Of course, you did have elements of, say, religion, say like the Knights Templar, that acted as banks in medieval Europe. Those are very interesting to look at. Of course, a lot of people got their personal loans through Jews. And this eventually led to the expulsion of all the Jews from England. I think, who expelled all the Jews from England? Is it Edward? Anyway, all the Jews got expelled from England because all the nobles owed them a bunch of money on unsecured loans, right? That they were being charged interest on. And they're like, it's more convenient to just kick the Jews out. So they kicked the Jews out, and then got to avoid having to deal with the payments there. So it's an interesting thing. I would really like to find this book that I had, but it would take me way too long to look it up. But it goes through all of the stuff with usury very, very, very clearly. And there's no way for student loans to not be usury. They are usurious by their very nature. So you are not morally obligated to pay them back, nor are you morally obligated to pay the interest on them. In my opinion, that's just an opinion. That's not a legal thing; it's a moral thing. Meaning, like, if you could avoid paying the interest legally, you're not morally obligated to pay it. Whereas you are morally obligated to pay back other loans. Maybe a secular reformation, separation of corporate and state, reconcile individuality familiarity. Decentralize the data. Big tech are modern mercantilists, aka corporatism. Yes, they are. Challenge progressive canons. I don't know if you can have, a separation of corporation and state. This is something that's not, it would have to be done probably on some sort of constitutional level and, of course, enforced by people who believe it. That's the problem with the Constitution, is that you create a Constitution, but it's only as strong as the people enforcing it are. Otherwise, there's no reason for the Constitution. The Constitution means whatever the Supreme Court says it means. So it's a very difficult thing to overcome. In fact, the bigger the government gets, the harder it is to institute any reforms without dictatorial control, without some sort of Sulla or Caesar reorganizing the entire system by dictate, by saying this is how it is. I dictate now this is the way it is because I can singularly do that and enforce it with arms. That's the way that revolutions end up happening. There's almost no way to roll back the power of government or to significantly reform government without dictatorial revolution, like a coup by the military or something like that. It just doesn't really happen. There's too much investment into the status quo and into those special interests that control it. Merry Christmas, David. Thank you, Kaino. I hope you and your family have a blessed day. We are having a blessed day. Thank you. In fact, we're going to have dinner here in about 40 minutes, I think. So we don't have a student loan problem here. Good. Public universities. It's not perfect, obviously, but you can even work and study at the same time. Well, here you have to work and study because it costs so much to go. You spend all your student loans on your tuition, and then you have to work a job to pay your rent, stuff like that. So we still have public universities, but you have to pay tuition to go to them. Now I'm going to give the flip side to completely funding universities. I've had plenty of people talk about other countries. They're completely, they're funded universities, which are maybe like daycare centers. They just aren't very rigorous. The thing is that you really don't want the government to just pay for the universities entirely, because the benefit of the university is concentrated in those who attend, but the cost is diffuse and put on those who don't attend. So you are actually doing something that's actually regressive. You're taxing, I'm trying to remember what Milton Friedman said about it. You're taxing the people in Watts to send the children of Beverly Hills to college. That is to say, it's the people in the upper socioeconomic tiers who go to college and receive any kind of benefit from college, and it's the people on the bottom who have to pay for it. We have this right now with our public universities here in California and in the U.S. Is that, what's the closest one to me? I think is UC Merced or UC Berkeley, right? So UC Berkeley or UC San Francisco, whichever one I want to go to here. There's actually two huge systems here, Cal State and UC. They get tax money from the state. So I'm taxed and the university gets my money. And then they also charge the students. So it's both. And it's like the students are paying thousands upon thousands of dollars a year in tuition, and the taxpayer is paying thousands upon thousands of dollars a year to support the university. It's both. It's like worst of both worlds. Now, what we've done in the U.S., though, is that rather than having, we have our universities, and our universities are private, and they're really for the upper echelon of people who can afford to go there and who are smart enough to go there. And it's transitioned into, we got to create public universities so more people can go to college and gain access to this stuff. And what you actually end up doing is reducing the quality of the education that's there, but also reducing the value of the certification that you get from it, the value of the degree, to the point where a degree is no longer, you used to be, if somebody had a college degree, it meant that they were generally knowledgeable. That is no longer the case. If someone has a college degree, it really doesn't mean that at all. In fact, it might mean the opposite. I think we've crossed the threshold and it's going the opposite direction, where if somebody has a degree, I can look at the school and go, you have a degree from UC Berkeley. Not only are you not generally knowledgeable, but you are generally ignorant. You are going to be more ignorant than the guy who never went to college and just experienced the world in life, because you've been indoctrinated to believe things which are not true. You've been indoctrinated into a worldview which is in conflict with reality. at this point. And people are like, Berkeley socialist this. I wish that they were just educated to be socialists. They're educated to be completely schizophrenic about their beliefs. We call people coming out of universities Marxists, but they do not adhere to like traditional Marxist values or Marxist philosophy at all. They have an amalgam of social justice philosophy, which is completely erratic and has no internal consistency. And they've been raised to think that that's the way it is, that internal consistency is not necessary or appropriate for anything. At the very least, I could say socialist philosophy is empirically false, but it at least in some way has some sort of internal logic to it. These people graduating have none. So when I look at someone with a college degree, it's now the opposite. If they used to be, oh, you have a degree from Yale, you're an educated, intelligent, wise person because you went to those smart doctors at Yale and you learned the important things about our history from the last couple thousand years, and I can expect you to be a generally knowledgeable person who will pick up on this job and be able to do it well. Now, when I see someone has a degree from college, from a university, it's the opposite. It's like, not only are you not generally knowledgeable, you're actually generally ignorant. Here's the double part of this, is that college degrees, as time goes on, are more and more about the major and less about some general set of knowledge. So they are more and more about certifying someone in some specific area, underwater basket weaving or computer science or whatever it's going to be. So if a person has a doctorate, so like look at Joe Biden's wife, there's all this conflict that she's Dr. Biden or something. They're taking that from physicians. Actually, physicians co-opted the word doctor from university teachers. Doctor means teacher, and it was a title for theologians at universities. So it is physicians who stole the word doctor from the theologians and from the college professors. I taught at a university, by the way. Anyway, putting that aside, that people don't realize what the word doctor means. It's like, well, she has an educational doctorate. What that means is she might be very, very knowledgeable in a very small sliver of information. So if someone has a doctorate, they might know a lot about their area of expertise, but that is no guarantee they know anything else about anything there. In fact, from my experience in academia, when I go and I look at the people that I worked with and worked alongside and then knew or studied under, these people are idiots. Now, they might be very knowledgeable about what they were teaching me, but when it comes to general knowledge of how the world operates, or even a basic logical understanding of how reality operates, they are idiots. So they know a lot about one little thing, and everything else they're completely ignorant to. Having a doctorate does not mean you are smart, and it certainly does not mean you are wise. It means you are above a certain intelligence level. You're at least average intelligence or better, because you're really not going to be able to write dissertations, even bad ones. Apparently, Biden's wife's dissertation is really bad. You're not even going to be able to write a bad one unless you have like 100 IQ. But it doesn't mean you're wise. It has no general certification of knowledge of wisdom at all. And if you look at certain areas, it's going to be the opposite. Someone who has a doctorate in art, that is no guarantee they're a good artist, and in fact might be a signal that they're a bad artist. Most of the art students coming out of American universities in particular are terrible at art. And it's very clear to me that if somebody put out their art degree as, hey, you can trust me to make good art because I have an art degree, I'd be like, nope, show me your portfolio, right? It's no longer a meaningful certification of any kind in any area other than very specific areas where we need some way of certifying it, like maybe not even really computer programming. I mean, computer programming is moving to a portfolio system as well, and it really has been for a while. Maybe even a medical degree, maybe a medical degree. Medical degrees are still professional certifications that are meaningful. I'll give it to medical degrees. So anyway, that's my rant. That's my rant for that. P-Brain IQ and Hypermind IQ agree. The Constitution is a piece of paper. It's true. It just comes down to what people want to do with it. Trump coup 2021. I don't think it's going to happen. I could see a future where we live in a neo-feudalist society as people get disillusioned with the tyranny of the majority. I could see that too. I think Dune has that. Oh, we are actually required to pay for every course we fail in order to redo it for starting. Interesting. And for starting studying a new field of study. That's interesting. So there's a little bit of skin in the game still. That's interesting, Gene. People no longer read the books and soak up knowledge in a general way. I was talking about the Doge of Venice one time. Not my field of expertise, but I knew about him. And the guy I was talking to had never heard of the term and thought I meant the Doge meme. Doctor is a normal scientific title here. That's how we call people who have PhDs. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what it means. Doctor means teacher. And it's physicians who kind of picked it up and started being called doctor. And I don't have a problem with physicians being called doctor. Doctor, what's wrong with me? In fact, we need some of those designations because doctors are working alongside other medical professionals who have a lower level of certification. A nurse, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant. Those are not doctors, right? They're not physicians. Even here, we have different medical degrees. There's a DO, Doctor of Orthopedics, I think, and then an MD. But they both end up with like the same level of certification, but the program is different somehow. I'm not a doctor, so I don't remember all the specifics. I just know that like I grew up with a lot of people that became doctors or became physicians, and they became physicians through different routes in some cases. How long will Krampus Christmas 2020 be available? Till mid-January at least. So it'll be available for like almost another month. So if you want to get it, now's a good time to get it. It's really big. I'm emphasizing paperbacks going forward. This is a fun little business thing, just to transition away from me ranting about education and how doctor really doesn't mean crap. I've taken a look at my book sales this past couple months. And man, my paperback sales are crushing my ebook sales now. I've never thought I would see this day. I never thought I'd see the day where the paperback sales are not only equal to the ebook sales, but are actually more. I'm just talking in terms of revenue. So I really set up all of my paperbacks so that the paperback generates roughly the same amount of revenue as the ebook, if not a little bit less. Okay, so if you're wondering why is this ebook $2.99 but the paperback is $8? It's like there's like $6 or $8 worth of cost built into making a paperback. That's just how it is. But people are still choosing to buy the $8 paperback rather than buy, or even this one's like $16.99 or something, right? They'd rather buy the $15. Oh, no, wait, this one's way cheap. This one's like $13. They'd rather buy the $13 paperback than the 99-cent ebook. It's not my preferences that matter. Now, I prefer paperbacks I just like physical books better. I feel like I read them better. I don't know what that is. I have an e-reader. I don't mind using it if I really want to get something on the cheap, but I prefer the paperbacks. They've been doing better than the ebooks, like across the board for a while now. I'm making more money from paperbacks than I am from ebooks. And this is the first time I've ever seen this happen in this business. But I think I don't know who it was that was predicting this. Maybe it was Vox Day. Vox Day was like, we think that people are going to be buying physical editions more in the future because ebooks are a transitory thing that disappear off your device, or they're disposable, and people are going to want to buy books that they can pass down to their descendants. They want to buy that really nice hardback version of the book they like. And that's where we're going to put our focus. Just kind of to the side of that, it's like I don't pay that much attention to my sales business other than I'm like, oh, it looks like I'm making money. Every once in a while I check in and see if my ads are working. But I don't run a ton of ads because I'm not in the traditional Kindle sell a 20-book series thing. I'd like to write the books that I care about writing and I enjoy writing, and I want to then see if people want to read them, and that's the way I like to do my business. But yeah, paperbacks are doing really good. Way better than ebooks right now. Now, I think I'm still selling more ebooks than paperbacks, but I think the royalty level is like the paperbacks are doing a lot better. Kind of interesting. What are your thoughts on ranked choice voting or ring star voting systems as opposed to first past the post? There's a whole bunch of videos I think by CGP Grey that are kind of interesting on YouTube that people really like, that explain those a lot. My personal thing as far as like choosing those, I mean, you could go with a parliament. None of them are perfect. There's no like perfect system. You know, look at them. Hair's starting to grow back from the COVID. It's starting to grow back. I'm getting some like little, see, getting a little bit of hair growing back. I lost like half my hair from having coronavirus. That was fun. What are your thoughts on ranked choice? So I don't dislike it, but we basically already have a runoff system here in the US called the two-party system, because the two-party system developed because first past the post creates a two-party system. And the two parties are not ideologically consistent. So if you want ideologically consistent parties, you have to go with something like ranked choice voting or like parliamentary system or something like that. You know, it's another way of doing it, but we already have a runoff system here in the US called the two-party system. People don't like to think of it like that because the parties are these Machiavellian whorehouses, but that's the way it is. If you want to get rid of the Machiavellian whorehouses, you got to change it up. But they're never going to do it because why on earth would any Republican or Democrat which benefited from the two-party system ever change it? So if we're debating like which system's better, it's just intellectual play. You know, it's good for determining what you want to do in your big club, but it has no value in the American political system because you can't get enough will behind it without instilling a dictator. Like I said, there's just an inertia from the system being the way it is. How are you going to get Republicans and Democrats to change the voting system? They're not going to because they benefit from it. You'd have to have a dictator. You'd have to have Master of Rome, Master of Washington would have to rewrite the Constitution and make a bunch of reforms to fix the Republican system. And probably have to do a bunch of purges in the process. You probably have to have Sola. Until we have a Sola, you can't have a renewal of the Republic. It's just not going to happen. I just don't see how it can happen without dictatorial control because there's too many invested interests that say that they have power. You can't get them to agree. They are holding the keys to power. You have to put all the keys to power in the hands of a small group of people or one person. You can only get the Republic through beneficial oligarchy. That's how we got the Republic to begin with. Is we had a group called the Founding Fathers, which were basically the war oligarchs from the Revolution, but they were very beneficent. And they decided we're going to make a republic that disempowers us as individuals because it's better for us to have a republic because we philosophically believe it. You know, it's like when Sulla gave up the dictate, he was dictator for life. Gave it up and went home. Gave it up and went back to the farm to live his Greek lifestyle. Hellenistic lifestyle. Ichibaka recently used the clip from your Bolshevik marketing video in his video Star Wars Story. I know. He told me. It's cool. The cathedral is what matters. I don't care if a Democrat takes office for 4 years. I'd rather have decades of cultural control. That's a good point. It's because from that you generate the opinions of the next generation. And here's the thing about the left, quote, the left. I'm just going to call them the atheist left for now. There's atheist right, but they're like super... They have an idol called the economy. Atheist left has an idol called social justice and an idol called like environmentalism. They don't have kids. You know, they have kids at a much lower rate than other people. So if you outbreed them and you actually don't put your kids in public school and you teach your kids the correct thing, like you'll win eventually. You know, you got to outbreed them. Vote for me for King Pope of America. New York City just approved ranked choice voting, and it will be a start for the next mayoral election in 21. Interesting. Now that could work on. Now then you could pay attention to that. I'm thinking for like congressional stuff. Like ranked choice stuff works really good if you just want to have one election and you want to disempower the parties. But it's really hard to disempower the parties. Okay. Wow. We have gone on for an hour and a half. That is cool. I would like to, besides finish eating my donut. This donut is so good. It used to be a Christmas tree. To give you an idea how big this donut is, let's see it next to the collection, Krampus Christmas. It's a big donut. They only make these around Christmas at my favorite donut shop in Modesto, Mr. T's. Man, that's good. This is like the best donut ever made. It's so good. Man, it's good. Yeah, wasn't Washington offered kingship? I don't think he was really offered it, but I think he could have become king. I think that's really historical editing. I'm not sure. I think people were debating it. He became president, and someone's like, if he goes back to being a farmer, he'll be the greatest man ever. I don't remember who said that. But then he did it. After 2 terms, he decided, I'm going to give up the presidency and I'm going to go back to Virginia. Now, he wasn't done politically. He was actually ended up back in uniform for the Whiskey Rebellion, I think. Is that it? No. It was the War of 1812? So he got named general again, I think, in the War of 1812, but he was too ill to do it. It was just kind of like a gesture to try to scare the British, I think. He actually went out when he was president during the Whiskey Rebellion, brought the army out as the actual head of the armed forces. You know, the commander in chief rode out with his soldiers to crush the Whiskey Rebellion. Cool's that? Anyway, fun fact about George Washington. George Washington is a 7-star general. 7 stars. It's a posthumous title that Congress awarded him. It's a posthumous title that was awarded him. Let's see here. I think he was awarded a 7-star generalship, General of the Armies of the United States. That way no one could ever be a higher rank than George Washington. So I think they gave it to him like in 1976 or something. So he's the highest ranked general. No one can ever rank higher than George Washington in terms of, like, we're all our ghosts are going to go fight a war and George Washington will be in charge. Thank you, Gene. Merry Christmas to you too. I appreciate the 10. Let's figure out what currency this is, because I don't remember what PLN stands for. Oh, Poland. Zloty. Is that it? Or Zloty? I appreciate it. I'm hoping Poland is being good to you. I can't approve the messages in chat for some reason. So I'll just copy paste this. I think YouTube might have frozen some things in chat because people were like spitting a bunch of anti-Semitic stuff in the chat. You wouldn't see it because their filters caught it, but now I can't really approve anything. Anyway, that's the Discord. I'm an atheist conservative. I don't care about the economy, but I don't have kids yet. You gotta come to the faith. That's the solution. But what I mean by that is that there's this group of like atheist, libertarian, right-wing people that it really just comes down to money for them. They're just super obsessed with money. Anyway, plans for... I'll probably do a separate stream to talk about this stuff because I really wanted to talk about it at the beginning. Plans for 2021. So some things for content that I want to gear up and do. I have a bunch of content stuff that I've done like some prep work for. I just didn't get around to recording because I've been so busy. So one of the things I was thinking about doing is I was talking to my friend Pete about this. Playing every Final Fantasy game, the mainline ones, all in order. And then doing some content on it, doing some analysis on it, like, story, gameplay, all that kind of stuff. And I would exclude the MMOs because that would be way too much. And for most of the games, I could probably get them done in a month. Like, stream them, play through them like 1 month per game, and actually probably less for the first couple ones. Like Final Fantasy 1, you could probably beat in a day. Like I could probably do it in a couple hours because I kind of know what to do for it. So you do Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Skip 11 because that's an MMO. 12, 13, 15. Without any of the sequels. I was like trying to think like how could I do this and do a lot of content on it and just have some fun streaming it? But if you go too far outside of that, then it becomes crazy. It's like, are we going to include Final Fantasy Tactics? It's like, man, I really like to play Final Fantasy Tactics because it's such a good game. Which version of the game should I play? Should I play the Final Fantasy that is like the updated graphics on like Android and iOS and PC, or should it be the original NES version? Which translation do you want to do? Obviously, some of them, like I can't do Final Fantasy II on the NES because that's Japanese. I'd have to learn enough Japanese to do it, and I don't have time to learn enough Japanese to do Final Fantasy II. So you'd have to do a translation or do some other modern update of it. Okay, Then if you're going to do a modern update of it, do you do the remastered version of Final Fantasy XII, which is actually the Zodiac International Job System version, but with updated graphics, or do you do the PS2 version? Now, I can play all of the original ones. I can play them all on original hardware, technically, except for Final Fantasy 2 and 3. Actually, I could do those with like a Famicom. But it just might be tough to do. It might be a little bit tough to do. But anyway, I was thinking about doing that and be like, that's like a year's worth of content. It'd be really fun to do. You could look at all the different game design aspects that have gone on with them, the aesthetics. There's so much to talk about with them, see how those developed from what started as like a gameplay style that was started, I think, with Dragon Warrior, or the very first Dragon Quest game called Dragon Warrior here in the US when it was released, and just go from there. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And then I wouldn't know, like, do I play Final Fantasy IX, like the PC version, or do we play the PS1 version? And I can play actually, I could play the PS1 version. Do I want to play it on original hardware, or I think it'd probably be better if I either played it on an emulator or like brought in a PS3 to play it and streamed it from a PS3. Same thing with like Final Fantasy 12. I could play the PS2 version. I could probably buy it off eBay. I don't have it right now, so probably get it from eBay or something and then put that in. Do you play that, or do you play the International Zodiac Job System version on PS2, or do you just play the PS4 version? Final Fantasy X, do you play the HD remaster? Do you play the original PS2 version? Which I have somewhere. Just watch out for the algorithm. You might turn into a Final Fantasy YouTuber. Well, it would end up being not a majority of the content. But it's something that is important. Is like you have to refresh what you're doing every once in a while. It's one of the reasons that I haven't really talked about Star Wars, even though there's been lots of discussion about The Mandalorian. Like I might do it as like, I haven't watched it because I haven't really wanted to watch it, and I haven't really had time to watch it. The time that I have to watch stuff is really when I'm doing cardio on a stationary bike. If I'm doing it on a stationary bike, that's when I have time to watch a movie or something. And I've been watching anime. So that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, was like more anime series and anime movies, because those otakus, man, they like to watch content on their animes, right? They like it. And I like to talk about that stuff. And I think there's a lot of story stuff to talk about that, frankly, you're just not going to get as much from the Western perspective. I mentioned when I was talking about love, right? I watched a romantic comedy anime that really does this as a message, where it's like the characters are really obsessed with their infatuation feelings. And then as the series progresses, they kind of figure out what love really means. And it's not what they originally thought. Things change as they go along because of their shared experiences and acts of love towards each other that they're not really fully aware that they're doing. So it's, that's something that I just don't see a lot in the West. I hope to hear your thoughts on Return of the Jedi. Oh, I haven't done Return of the Jedi. Yeah, I need to do that one. Yeah, your Star Wars videos constantly still get recommended to me. Anime reviews would be cool. Yeah, that's one of the things, you get kind of put in this little category called Star Wars YouTubing, and then it's hard to break out of it. Like, I've even thought about starting new channels and just like abandoning this one, because it's hard to know exactly what baggage is going to be brought forward. But I think more and more it's really more about the individual content. Like, YouTube's been very good at atomizing the content, not the creator. It used to be that the creator was a big package. That's why, it's still important to get subscribers, but now when it comes to recommended content, it's really about what that content is and not what the creator is doing. Now, I've looked at that from a data perspective. It's like I did get pretty much shadow banned like last year. I lost like 90% of my viewership within a couple days because of algorithm changes. I built some of that back up, but I've seen some videos that it's like, here's a video recorded on my phone. 150,000 views in a couple days. It's like sometimes stuff explodes and you can't really predict it. That's what I thought. Mandalorian, it seems like it's made for fans. And that's good. If you're a Star Wars fan and you really want stuff that's made for your tastes and made to appeal to you as a fan, that's what it is. Does that mean it's going to be good? Does that mean I think it's just good in general? It's okay. You know, the first season was okay. It had some episodes I liked. I think it ended in a way that I liked, but I really didn't like the way it began. It began very slow and painfully for me, and it felt like a fan film early on. And then I felt like it got a little bit better as it went on. I liked the episodic middle section a lot more because I just think episodic stuff works better for TV like that, rather than these big arcs where you don't resolve anything for long periods of time. You just end up filling it up with garbage, you know. Anyway, would love to hear your thoughts on My Hero Academia. It's a longer shonen, but it has a few interesting ideas. I might take a look at that one. There were some that I might do that it's like, I don't really want to watch the series, but I watched the first episode. You know, it's like, here's what I think about the first episode. I don't think this is for me, but let me analyze what's going on, you know, and look at some of that stuff. One of them was, what was it? K-On! I know people like this. To me, it was just like painfully boring and awkward. So I may just do like, here's the first episode analysis. You know, here's why I don't like it, but you may like that. If you want something that's really cozy, like K-On! Was very cozy. I want something that has very little tension in it. That's just relaxing to watch. Maybe that's you. And I like really simple pop music stuff. Maybe that's for you. But I'm a professional musician, so anything that's about music tends to not be enjoyable for me because I see past the layers too easily. And I'm just like, you know. Anyway. Season 2 of The Mandalorian is even more episodic than Season 1. Almost every episode is that way. That's kind of good to me. I may check it out. My Hero Academia is no good. I stopped watching after first season. Okay. There you go. Now, see, I love that stuff. That people have just wildly different opinions of it. I think My Hero Academia has been like explosively successful for reasons that the American comic industry just can't understand or get behind. So it's probably worth looking at for that reason. Okay, guys, I'm actually running out of time and I need to get ready for dinner here. K-On! Was more about putting on a second monitor and doing one's taxes. Well, the problem is that I don't like to watch dubs. So if I'm watching a dub, I just don't even want to bother if it's a dub. I just don't. They always suck, man. They're always like, and they change stuff in them, you know. And I don't know enough Japanese to put it on a second monitor and know what they're saying. Be like, oh, I understood that phrase, but then like half of them, like, what did he say? What? You know. So you know, maybe I have to like learn Japanese so that I can just watch anime as it comes out in Japan. But like that's so much effort to just like, I'm learning Japanese so I could watch anime. Oh yeah, I'm almost 40 by the way. Consider Attack on Titan. I love the soundtrack for Attack on Titan. It has this cool power metal soundtrack. But I didn't really... I watched a dub of it years ago, and I was just like, I don't like this. So I might watch it again. And I've noticed this, like magically, you switch over to subtitles, and you're like, well, all of a sudden, I like these actors and characters. I think English voice actors, I think they cast them like in bad ways. I did a video on this, but like they picked the wrong voices. There's one where what was it? Another romantic comedy I'll do some content on because I think it did a lot of writing things correctly that people should know about. But I watched one dub episode of it and it was like, wow, these characters are completely different when you put English voice actors. The character changes from like an energetic, very cute, awkward girl into just a depressed goth. Like they completely changed the attitude of the character in a way that just was schizophrenic. It made no sense and made the character actually unlikable. The series was Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions, right? And the character was whatever that girl, the one with the eye patches. Can't remember her name right now. But it's like, wow, they changed her character unbelievably by casting an English voice actor who just said everything with like a flat affect, like like tried to make it sound like a depressed goth girl. It's like, that's not her. That's not who she was. Speaking of fan service, do you know the big spoiler from the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian? There's a bunch of videos of people breaking down and crying during the final scene. No, I don't, but maybe I'll do something on it. So, you know, I don't know. Yeah, the anime dub industry is a horrible swamp. I hear that the German dubs are better. That's what I hear. That like the German ones are a lot better. Japanese isn't hard to learn grammatically. It's straightforward. It's just a lot of work. Yeah, you're right. I know some Japanese. The Japanese, there's a lot of subtle things about, when you add not just honorifics, but there's lots of little social things that get added into the language. That it's like, oh, watashi wa David desu. It's like, what's that extra word mean? It's like, nothing. You do it. Well, when do you not do it? Well, you got to learn when to do it and when to not do it. But after you say watashi wa, your name, you got to say desu. Desu. Right? It's like, oh. You got to say a lot of this stuff. Gozaimasu. Stuff you have to add. Well, you got to add that in there if you're talking to your teacher. Stuff like that. There's just like a lot of little things that you don't pick up on until you just in the language. I don't know enough Japanese to like put it on another monitor and really know what's going on. But I think the advantage of anime in general is that it's visually really appealing. You have much more creative abilities with something that's animated versus something that's just live action. Live action, it's more efficient. You just shoot actors acting and that's it, right? As far as, obviously if you're doing special effects, there's more to it. But when you're doing animation, it's like you could do whatever you want. You can have it as saturated as you want. You can use whatever color scheme you want. You're literally painting the scene, so you have a lot more visual tools at your disposal. I think that's the big advantage of anime. It's the imagination side of it. All right, but your family dinner's waiting. Yes, I got to go. Thanks, guys. I do appreciate it. The only dub I ever sat through entirely was Toradora. I didn't watch the Toradora dub. I watched the sub. But it's good. So I'll talk about it a little bit. So yeah, I'll talk about it. Maybe I'll watch one dub episode just to give like some perspective on like what do I think of the English voice acting. WA versus Ga is great. People have written libraries full of when to use what, but even the Japanese have no set rules. So you just have to learn by watching how they do it. That's exactly right. It's what's called in anthropology an edict, which is not an edict like the king has thus said, but these are social rules called dictory rules that are not spoken. They're not spoken and they're not mentioned, but they're part of social interaction. And I'll give you an example from the West, which is two people step into an elevator. What do? Well, chances are you stand as far away from each other as possible. The idea of personal space here in the West, that there's an arm length of distance, and if somebody is within an arm length of a distance of you, you're all of a sudden very uncomfortable. It's not socially appropriate to get closer than an arm length away from somebody, unless you are like intending to kiss them. So if somebody steps very close to you, all of a sudden you're like, what is this person doing? Is he trying to kiss me? Is he trying to whisper something to me? Is he trying to touch me? Is he making a pass at me? The social stuff goes haywire. Those are dictory rules. Like you go to different sides of it. Like I've said this before, and so people who are on the autism spectrum, they don't pick up on these things, and they don't pick up on some of the subtleties of language and some of the social things that go along with language. They misinterpret them because they haven't had them. They have to have those things spelled out. You have to tell them directly if somebody has autism. When you get into an elevator, you don't stand against somebody unless there's no room. So that's why you give scripts and stuff to autistic kids, because they need to go through a set order of things or they're going to mess up. They're not going to pick up on what the next thing they're supposed to say is or what that person means by that. So yeah, every culture has these, but Japanese language seems to be particularly like packed full of them, where there's lots of different little rules that aren't really spoken that you just kind of pick up on. Every culture has those. And so one of the things that happens with the personal space thing is somebody comes from, say, India, where their concept of personal space is smaller or just different. And they come here and they talk to you like kind of close, and they know English really well, but they don't realize. And so you go to and you back up, and the person is kind of following you around the room because you just instinctively take a step back when somebody's talking to you. If they're that close, it's just not comfortable. So in the West, we have this idea of personal space. It's not spoken, and every culture has those things. Try The Rose of Versailles, a favorite of a guy who wrote Berserk. Ooh. Escaflowne had a great German dub. Cowboy Bebop and Dragon Ball dubs are the best. I remember the old Dragon Ball dubs, like I grew up with those. And I have the Cowboy Bebop one, too. Mostly old school anime. Golden Boy is probably the best dub ever. Where can you watch The Rose of Versailles? Isn't it heart-wrenching? I love heart-wrenching stuff, though. I like stuff that's really melancholy. So I love stuff that gets that melancholy mood going. I feel like it's just, there's something about, I think the Japanese get melancholy. I think it's just something they get. It's in like samurai movies and stuff. There's always this third act where things just get, or like this transition into their third act in like these samurai movies where everything just gets like really melancholy. The mood, the way that they shoot the scenes gets just dark. I love it. Something about it. How do people get diagnosed for Asperger's? A psychologist has to do it. Okay. It's a psychologist. So a physician can refer you, but it's the psychologist who does it. There's a set, there's a set thing that you go through to get diagnosed with it. There's a couple tools that they use, or a couple assessment tests that they use for that. Thing is, most people don't have it. People call themselves autistic. It's like, just because you miss a social cue or two doesn't mean you're autistic, okay? Autism is something a little bit bigger than that affects language learning and all kinds of other things. So chances are you don't have Asperger's. Musashi was a very peaceful and nice anime. I liked Musashi a lot, actually. I only watched the first season, so I'd have to go back and watch the second one. It had a great melancholy mood to it, that one as well. Yeah. Psychologist is usually the one who's going to do it, whether it's in a school setting or in a private setting. Uh-oh. Ro, leave. Leave, pirate. Leave. You are not supposed to come in here. You get out.
I said, Mommy told me to come in. I just wanted to show you his outfit.
And it's a great outfit. You have to leave now.
Look in here.
You can't look in here.
What? Daddy's got cousins out, Ron.
You can't look in here.
Sorry, I didn't think about that.
Yes. You look like a very frightening pirate. I'm really scared. I think it's a great outfit.
I love you, sorry.
I love you too. Honey bun, what are you doing? Come here.
You don't have presents in there.
All right. Here's the dog. Merry Christmas, Mamacita. Donde is Santa Claus? We wait for him because it's Christmas Eve. Okay, time for dinner. Thanks, guys. What are your thoughts on Gandhi? I don't have time to talk about him. I think I've known too many Sikhs to like Gandhi. All right. Later, guys. Have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Newest, where's the collection? Krampus Christmas 2020. You can get it for $20.20. Collected big giant book. It's got a brand new novella in it. Okay? And some other books if you don't have them. Okay? If you don't have Muramasa and stuff yet, you could probably get a deal on this. It is available in ebook as well for $9.99, but I've noticed people like to buy they like to buy the paperbacks. They like to have something that's physical that can't be erased or just disappear. But thanks, guys. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Say bye-bye. That's her saying bye-bye.